Yes.
Okay, we've had some extra people join, so great to see everyone joining in and coming on board. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining us. Really excited to have you all here today. Today we'll be covering risk and resilience and talking about the key areas that we've been delivering value with various customers. This is predominantly a customer-focused event, but we will be covering some more broader areas in terms of what we're seeing in the market and so on. So my name is Cameron Milne. I'm the Customer Accounts Director for APAC. My general remit is to have general oversight of all of our customer base, but to look at ways that we can deliver value, to partner with them, and to deliver value in that regard. We've also got with us Orbus.
Thank you, Cam. Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Orbus Malik and I manage the professional services team. Been working with Orbus for over 4 years, and I am excited today to present one of the crucial topic in today's digital world, risk and resiliency. Over to you, Cam.
Thank you. Okay, so a brief agenda for today. It will be for 30 minutes in total, so nice and quick. Hopefully we can discuss and cover off some key points for you. We're going to potentially run a poll or two during the session to get some feedback, to keep it interactive, potentially open up for some questions towards the end as well. But we'll be discussing the customer or the existing Australian landscape with regards to risk. We're then going to jump into a product demo and highlight some of the key areas that we're delivering value to at present. Okay, so a couple of key call-outs for the Australian landscape. Now, some of you may have noticed that that security and risk and governance is hot. It's a hot subject in the Australian market at the moment, and that probably has to do with the fact that based on the second half of last year, the Australian landscape as a whole was 25 times higher in terms of the global average for data breach density. So we're really getting hit pretty hard, and we're seeing some big changes and some big priority shifts in terms of how businesses are approaching risk, analysing their risk, and looking to explore how they can deliver value for their own individual roles, their departments, and their organisations as a whole. Part of that is underpinned by the fact that there's been new legislation that's being introduced, and we're going to start to see more and more of that as time progresses. Some of the key legislation that we've seen so far is, for example, the $2.2 million fine for serious data breaches that was launched in 2020. And there's current discussions that are underway with regards to raising that threshold up to $50 million. So the risk exposure for an Australian business could be up to $50 million, which is substantial. And I think that's really where we're starting to see some of the key shifts and focus at an enterprise level. Some of those key data breaches like Optus and Medibank, for example. I don't know if any of you that were part of those businesses, but I certainly was. And I've also heard of a recent data breach with passports as well. So I think it is a hot subject, and we're seeing a big focus across our customer base in terms of how they can become more resilient to protect themselves against that risk. We're also seeing some of the legislation like APRA CPS 230. Some of our customers are looking to aim for the compliance date of January 2024. And equally, some of the other areas in compliance and regulations that are coming to the table around cybersecurity frameworks, and some of that can be underpinned by the controls of NIST and certain other elements and frameworks that we're going to discuss and highlight and touch on today. But ultimately, businesses are really looking for ways that they can improve their business resilience and really, get a grip of where their risk profile is, and to be able to identify applications, ownerships, profiles, to be able to profile that risk, and equally to drive better business decisions using the power of BI. So for those of you that aren't specialists or aren't fully familiar with why risk and resilience actually matters, we've included some key focus areas here to get you up to speed in terms of what businesses are really looking at in terms of how they can mitigate and manage risk and improve resilience. some of the key focus areas are financial loss. So without having a good strategy in place and without leaning in and being proactive as opposed to being reactive, it's important to have the appropriate levels and measures and processes in place to reduce the impact of the business. Equally, across reputational damage, nobody really wants, or a consumer or another business, doesn't want to work with a company that's been damaged or had continuous threats, or they haven't done things to mitigate that risk. Equally, operational disruptions, and that spans the entire enterprise, right from supply chain right through to cyber attacks, and equally the pandemic that we've just seen as a result that can halt operations. Equally, compliance and regulation. So this is a big area that we're seeing across some of the bigger banks as well, and large enterprises and companies that are going through mergers and acquisitions, and how they can become compliant and focus on becoming resilient into the future. And equally, that loss of competitive advantage. Businesses now more than ever are focused on ways that they can not only improve resilience, but deliver a great experience for their employees, and equally their customers as well. So how can resilience and having a good proactive approach give your customers the best possible experience so that they're not impacted as well? So resiliency is an orchestrated exercise, and this is a bit of a flow in terms of how we recommend you look to identify and manage risk, and to improve your resilience in the enterprise. So it starts with anticipating that risk, and part of that can be understanding what's happening with your data, what your risks are, preventing that. So looking at the impacts of particular risks or applications that may be high threat, high risk. Adapting your future strategy, so modeling your current state versus future state risk as well, and your current architectural layer or stack, and responding and recovering. So how do you actually plan for the future and be more proactive in terms of how you're managing risk and resilience? So you're probably wondering, Orbus, they're not a security company. Where do you actually fit in the risk life cycle? So where do we fit in? And the answer to that question is pretty much everywhere. Although we're not a security layer, we're definitely not a security software. We are involved across that life cycle, and everything from gaining visibility of our application suite to who owns the applications, to the dependency of those applications, right through to maintaining compliance. So what are the controls that we're putting on, that we're applying to our architecture to ensure that we're adhering to certain compliance and regulations, like I mentioned earlier? So today we're going to be covering off some key questions. So who are the application owners, for instance? We're seeing that's a big question that a lot of companies like to address and ask. Equally, what are the applications that are exposed to risk? And how can we assess, identify, and limit and control risk? So this particular, this is a breakdown of the key drivers of risk, and the elements that are incorporated into managing risk and driving up resilience of the business. So the key area, the focus points that we're going to address today are inclusive of risk assessment. So how can we socialize and capture information and crowdsource information at an enterprise level, at an organizational level, to understand and identify risk, to analyze those risks and what's the likelihood of impacts in the future. Risk management, so developing and implementing risk management strategies from a strategic layer. Cybersecurity is part of it, but once again, we're not a cybersecurity company, but we are included as part of that profiling and understanding the impacts of certain applications. Business continuity planning, so minimizing the impact of disruption and restoring critical business functions. So I think continuity planning is really important. I've seen a lot of large businesses trying to do it well, but I think where they're failing is by the next point, the organizational culture. So organizational culture is so important with driving enterprise architecture value, and equally driving risk and resilience value, because in order to drive change, in order to drive things like transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement, we have to have the right culture. We have to have the right layers in terms of how the business is approaching technology and how technology is partnering with the wider business to adopt those changes, to drive that change, and equally to get the types of inputs back from the rest of the business so that you have a good view of where the security risks are and you're getting those inputs. Okay, so some of the key topics we're going to be taking through in the demo are a risk overview and how do we actually get a view of our risks. Some of the assessments that we can potentially execute and some of the integrations with things like Word, so some pretty cool things there, and how we actually socialize that information through things like SharePoint. As most of you know, we are a Microsoft house, so the integration, the interoperability with Microsoft is our focus, and that's part of the advantage of working with us, is that you can actually use the Microsoft stack through those tight integrations and that interoperability to access and use Microsoft SharePoint and Forms and Word, for example, to run assessments and to pull that data back into the system to be able to then report on that data, to get insights and to be able, and to position yourself in a proactive manner to make business decisions that are aligned with your future state and best practices. Now, I might just run a quick poll as well. We've got a good number of people on the call. So the first poll that we might run is, for example, how often does your organization conduct a security risk assessment? So it'd be interesting to see what type of responses we get back from this. Is it quarterly, annually, biannually, rarely, or never? It is multiple choice, so feel free to select the ones that are most important to you, or if you're doing it once a year, or once a quarter, or once a month. Okay, we've got annually, quarterly as well. Okay, annually and quarterly seems to be the way to go at the moment. Biannually, okay. In some cases, it could be, we've got 10%, which is rarely. I'm not sure if we'll get a never in there based on the state of the current landscape of the market. So 40% quarterly, 45% quarterly, 36% annually, 9% biannually, 9% rarely. So yeah, predominantly we're looking at a quarterly focus, which is good, but we are starting to see the trends moving towards a more cyclic fashion in alignment with more of a proactive manner as opposed to just doing it quarterly. So, but yeah, great to see some of those responses as well. Okay, we might, and for now, we'll maybe do another couple of polls towards the end, but that was great to see some of the feedback from the poll in terms of how often you're running that. So it's good to see that you're engaged on that front. I'm now going to hand over to Orbus to take us through some of the applications and some of the actual solution demonstrations and deep dives, of which he's done a fantastic job. SharePoint is going to be a big component of that in terms of how he's highlighting the value, and I'd like to encourage you all to consider how you're using SharePoint as part of that interoperability with Orbus to deliver messages. And I think Orbus has done a fantastic job of taking us through and walking us through specifically how we can use something like SharePoint to layer information to speak to a particular narrative.
Well, thank you, Cam. Firstly, today I'm going to walk you through and give you some insights on how we can capture risk and controls as well. But before I dive in, I want to introduce you to our product, iServer 365. It's a powerful tool. It's going to help you to understand more about your risk landscape. And we do integrate with Microsoft Office 365. And as Cam said, SharePoint is the best way to communicate and socialize that content as well. So today, I'm going to walk you through some of the content which I have built in SharePoint using iServer 365 as a back engine. Now, when it comes to risk management itself, we have a good understanding and we understand why it's crucial for all the businesses as well. But risk management, essentially what it does, it aims to help organizations to get better visibility and reporting for risk identified across different EA assets, but throughout the entire life cycle of their associated implemented controls as well. Now, there are different number of goals you might be looking to address when it comes to risk management itself, and we have built in some of our platform to deliver some of those goals. But again, each organization might have different goals as well, and I want to help you to understand how we can leverage a platform like iServer 365 to quickly get you to deliver some of those goals. To get started, I want to introduce ISO 365 provides support, and we can leverage a lot of industry-wide standards out there. So we have a security subsub architecture framework. That's something which we integrate, and we help you to use this as a reference model. But in addition to that, then there are additional cybersecurity security frameworks like NIST or ISO or COBIT, and all of these different jargons out there as well. But again, all of these are important frameworks which we can definitely leverage in order to get started, to help you to get up to speed very quickly. Now, how do we manage risk when it comes to ISO 365? We provide a simplified version of our meta model that allows you to start managing your risk. It helps organizations to get better visibility and reporting of identified risk and the associated implemented controls. So ideally, what you're looking at on the screen is a simplified version of our meta model, which allows you to associate your risk to controls coming from different framework, but it's also connecting these risks to different portfolios, such as applications, technologies, or even business strategies, content like goals. So today, let's start with the where do we get started? So when it comes to capturing, how do we capture risk and controls as well? One key approach is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment. Threats, vulnerabilities, and impact. With ISO 365, you can automate all of that process using some of our out-of-box integrations. So to start with, we're looking at an Excel import plugin that allows me to quickly capture all of my risk portfolio into ISO 365. In addition to that, we do provide some of the out-of-box integrations and REST API. Here's an example of one of our platform, OneTrust, which you can, if you are capturing your risk and controls in a platform like OneTrust, we integrate directly with it, and you can import some of these risk and controls straight from these portfolios into ISO 365. Now, we got all of this information. How can we start socializing that content with our wider business team? Here is one portfolio view of our risk catalog to get better understanding how many risks do we have, what's the risk landscape looks like from an organization perspective. And using ISO 365 and SharePoint side, we can help to capture and fill the gaps where needed. So people can contribute and fill the gaps of providing certain information. If the owners of these risks are someone else, they can provide that information very seamlessly using SharePoint. Now, the first part is to capture all the risk landscape. Now we maintain that information in repository. What's next? It's all about linking our risks to associated. So in that case, I want to help you to show some of our other views. So here's a view of our risk catalog coming from our platform. In addition to that, we can now start linking this risk to controls. And here's a nice overview of a metrics view where you can use risk and controls and start mapping them, ideally by clicking on these empty boxes, and this allows me to quickly create my association between risk and control. Taking this to one step further, I can now start looking at my assets. So here's a list of my assets in inventory. And I can, in this example, I'm looking at an application and start understanding a little bit more about vulnerability and we can now start using traceability to understand more about the threats which it exposed to, as well as what other risks does it results in, and then all the controls which it impacts. So you can see how easily we can drill down all the way down to risk to all the way to the individual different assets. How do we visualize these impacts? So here's another view where we are looking at one risk, access control, and I can understand my risk landscape and risk impact to different assets, such as my applications, my business capabilities, or even information like data entity, but also how do we mitigate using different controls. So again, different ways how you can visualize it, how you can share, and you can communicate these different views to your wider business team. In addition to that, we do provide integration directly with Visio. So here's a Visio document showing you your risk landscape, creating some Visio artifacts, but also doing individual assessments when it comes to risk assessments. Now, all of that information is quite useful. We have quite a powerful repository sitting with all this information. How we can use our native Microsoft Word plugin, which allows us to quickly export a document like risk assessment document. So in this example, I'm showing you a Word document, which essentially been backed by ISO 365 repository. And here are some of the diagrams which I can embed, but I can also get repository information, start providing all in this live document. So again, different artifacts can be produced very quickly by click of a button. Now we have all of that information in our platform. Let's talk about some of the dashboards which we provide. And these dashboards are the best way for you to analyze your risk and help you to make some decision making. So we have seen a picture of this risk management insights report. Let me give you a live demo of this dashboard. This dashboard, again, answering some of the common questions which are out there. So let's start with one of our questions: what are the risk landscape? So here I'm looking at my risk portfolio, risk overview. That gives me a better understanding about all my risk across the organization and some of their life cycle stages and some of the different categories. Here's one example called false positive authentication. Let's get better understanding about this risk by looking at risk details. Now here, I got a nice one-pager to provide me all the details about my risk. In this case, I can understand more about the impacts, the inherent risk, and as well as the target risk, but also what are the controls which we have already implemented to mitigate this risk. And these controls might be aligned with some of our frameworks. So in this example, we're looking at ISO framework, which are aligning these controls to. On the right-hand side, you're looking at how risk is associated to different assets. So what are the impacted assets? So I can see there are 6 applications here. And in addition to that, I have different other portfolios, which I can get a better view how my risks are associated to my other business concepts. Another example to present on the dashboard would be risk assessment, quite a hot topic. And how do you quickly capture this information within the PyServer platform? We provide a range of different solutions, such as surveys, forms within SharePoint side. So you can crowdsource this information, get a better understanding about these risks, and do the assessment on it, and visualize that using our out-of-box dashboards as well. So these are some of our risk assessment dashboard. And lastly, I think so, as I said, we can be coming from a different business domain. So in this example, I want to show up how my applications are exposed to risk. So in this, to help you to navigate around here, we're starting from the left-hand side. Essentially, here I got a list of all my business capabilities. So I can easily slice and dice the information and understand my customer capability and see what are the applications which is helping me to deliver it. Now, not just that, but now I have a better view of what are the risks associated to next to it, and what are the stages of these risks for these different assets. Now, this is just one example from our application domain, but you might be coming from technology space, or you might be coming from a data space as well to understand what are the risks associated with our information, especially with the cyber attacks. So that's one of the other visibility you can get within this same one dashboard. But think about your strategic goals, right? Your business, your drivers as well, and understand what goals are actually going to be impacted and what are the risks associated to them. So end of the day, essentially for us, providing you risk with the visibility on an EA level, on the enterprise level, that's the goals which we try to help you to deliver through these insights and dashboards as well. Lastly, wanted to quickly call out that you can also align them with some of the frameworks. If you are using NIST or ISO, you can understand which controls has been implemented and what's the controls maturity looks like as well. So overall, these dashboards help us to understand our risk insights, our landscape as well. In addition to that, we also have some security architecture dashboards and also vulnerabilities and threats. So I think for the key message here is not just the dashboard, but how do we get started, how we can leverage a powerful engine like iServer 365 to deliver some of these goals. So thank you again for joining me today to discuss this very important topic. I hope you have learned to take some actions to certain your risk and governance strategy. Remember, with iServer 365, with Orbus software, you can have the power to manage data risk and start providing some insights to your audience as well.
Excellent, great. Thanks for taking us through that, Awais. Really comprehensive and very articulate, and I love the way you present. So thank you. Just another quick poll for everyone. Hopefully you can see that now. Just a pretty straightforward question in terms of what challenges has your organisation faced when implementing business resilience and security practices in the last, let's say, 12 months or recently. yeah, keen to get some feedback on this. I think, you know, change management is probably a big one in terms of resistance to change, but equally we've got one here for a lack of experience and skill, which is really good to see, a good context as well. And yeah, so anyone else, if you can just fill out the, just select which one to give us a view of where you're sitting today, that would be really helpful. Okay, lack of resources. Yeah, okay, so we're seeing that as well in terms of the EA function and the ability to manage data and data lifecycle management. So that's an area that we're having a lot of conversations with about as well. Resistance to change is leading the way, so 43% nominating resistance to change, which I think is testament to the fact that businesses, it's difficult to drive value and translate that value from the EA function out to the wider business. So we are seeing a big problem with that as well, and it's an area that we're focusing on. We've got some maturity models which are coming down the line, which I would encourage you to reach out to your contact to have a conversation about how we can actually, we've got a perspective and a point of view on driving up the maturity of EA, and that could be related to any particular area, whether it's resilience and security or portfolio management and so on. Okay, so the leader at this time is lack of experience, expertise and skill, lack of resources coming in second, and lastly, resistance to change. So thank you everyone for interacting with that. I'll close that poll there, and I might just do one more poll for everyone. So this is a really straightforward poll. Just a yes or no. Has your organization had to deal with a security breach in the last year? Interested, yes. Okay, so 10% voted so far. You can just select either yes or no to give us a view of where you're sitting today. That would be great. Okay, 14%. Okay, yes. So at the moment we're looking at 80% of business, 83% so far of companies have experienced a security breach. So as you know, it's a testament to the Australian landscape and equally the actions from the government around mandates and legislation and law. It's really interesting to see, and it's additional confirmation that this is a big focus area for the Australian market. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Okay, so we're just about at the end of the polling. I'll close that down now and share the responses after. If we could just bring up that other one slide. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end of our session. We like to keep it short and sweet. We hope that you've learned a few things today. We would encourage you to, if you saw anything that you liked or that ticked the box in terms of how you'd like to become better enabled and learn, please reach out to either myself on the email at the bottom there or your account manager or your CSM. Part of helping and guiding you on this journey is doing an assessment of requirements and having a chat with you about what else we're seeing in the market and taking you by the hand and leading you in that way and partnering with you. So thank you everyone for joining us. It was great to have you all. Thank you for your interaction. And we look forward to engaging and working with you in the future.
Thank you, Gan. Thank you everyone again.
Thank you.